The idea of adoption feels so universal, right? But what it actually means has changed so much over time. In India, it's this incredible story of a huge legal and social shift. We're talking about a journey from a religious duty a child owed to their parents to a fundamental right that society owes to a child. So let's trace this amazing evolution together.
And really, this one question is at the heart of everything we're talking about today. For centuries, the law was all about what the parents needed. But a complete revolution in thinking has flipped that idea on its head. Understanding that big switch is exactly what we're going to do.
Okay, so our journey is going to unfold in 5 main parts. We'll start way back in ancient India with this purely religious idea. Then we'll move through the kind of messy colonial era, witness a real revolution in Hindu law, and finally land in the modern era with a secular system that puts the child first.
To really get where we are now, we have to go all the way back to the beginning. And in ancient Hindu law, the reason for adoption would be almost unrecognizable to us today. It had very little to do with giving a child a loving home and pretty much everything to do with a parent's spiritual obligations.
The whole concept was called dataka, which literally means the gift of a son. And its purpose was completely spiritual. You see, an adopted son was needed to ensure the parents' salvation by performing their funeral rites. He also carried on the family name. The child in this whole equation was basically a means to a spiritual end. Their own personal well-being? It just wasn't really part of the conversation.
And when you look at the rules for this practice, it's so clear how parent-focused it was. I mean, look at this. Only men could adopt, and they could only adopt a son. Daughters were completely out of the picture. And get this, a wife's consent wasn't even required. It just shows you a system built not really on family, but on patriarchy and ritual.
Now, you might think that colonial rule would bring some kind of modernization. But when it came to adoption, it actually made things a lot more complicated. Instead of one unified system, this whole period was just defined by a bunch of fragmented laws.
So what you had was this patchwork of personal laws. Hindus kept their ancient customs, but other communities, like Muslims and Christians, they had rules for guardianship, but not really a legal concept for full adoption. This meant that your ability to create a family through adoption depended entirely on what religion you followed.
After decades of this piecemeal system, the first huge, seismic shift happened in 1956. The Hindu Adoptions and Maintenance Act, or HAMA as it's known, came along and it didn't just tweak the rules, it completely revolutionized the concept of adoption, at least for the Hindu community.
This chart just makes it so clear how radical these changes were. All of a sudden, daughters could be adopted, giving them equal status. That's huge. Women were now empowered to adopt on their own, and, crucially, a wife's consent became mandatory. This turned adoption from something a husband did alone into a real partnership. The old religious ceremony was also made optional, which was a big signal that we were moving from ritual to rites. Seriously, this wasn't just a legal update, it was a major step for gender equality in family law.
Now, HAMA was a massive deal for Hindus, but it left this big question hanging. What about everybody else? So the next chapter on our story is this long, difficult struggle to create a single, secular law that could bring all Indians under one system. And as you can see from this timeline, it was a long and bumpy road. A law from way back in 1890 only offered guardianship, which is really just a shadow of what adoption is. A big attempt at a uniform law failed to pass in 1972. The real breakthrough didn't happen until the new millennium, with the Juvenile Justice Act of 2000. That act finally created a secular path for adopting kids in need, a path that was made even stronger and clearer in 2015.
And that long journey brings us right up to the modern era, where the entire philosophy of adoption has been turned completely upside down. The main question is no longer, what do the parents need, but instead, what is best for the child? This shift from parental duty to the child's welfare is the single most important feature of adoption law today.
This principle, which the Supreme Court has stated over and over again, is now the absolute bedrock of Indian adoption law. It's the ultimate test. It means that in any legal question, in any conflict, the welfare of the child is the one thing that matters more than anything else.
And this whole philosophy was really put to the test in the huge 2014 case of Shabnam Hasmi. Here, the Supreme Court made a really important distinction. They said that while nobody has a fundamental right to adopt a child, every child has a right to a family. And because of that, the court ruled that the secular Juvenile Justice Act is an option available to every single Indian citizen. This was a game changer. It meant that personal religious laws could no longer stand in the way of adoption.
The impact of that ruling is just massive. It can't be overstated. It officially made the Juvenile Justice Act the great equalizer in adoption law. It created this single, secular bridge that anyone could use. It made sure that the child's best interest wasn't just a nice idea, but the one standard that applies to everyone, everywhere in the country.
So that brings us to today, to the new frontier of adoption law. As our ideas about family, gender, and identity keep evolving, new questions are popping up. How will the law handle issues like LGBTQ+ adoption or surrogacy? You see, the journey isn't over. The big challenge for the future is making sure the law stays flexible and responsive, but always anchored to that one supreme principle, the welfare of the child.
All right, let's do a quick recap of this incredible journey we just covered. We saw adoption evolve from a parent's religious duty into a child's secular right. We looked at two game-changing laws, HAMA, which totally transformed Hindu adoption, and the Juvenile Justice Act, which created that uniform path for everyone. But look, if you take away just one thing, let it be this. Today, the single guiding star of adoption law in India is the paramount welfare of the child. Thanks for joining me for this explainer.